This episode of The Candid Frame is brought to you by the Charcoal Book Club. Their carefully curated selections reflect the best in contemporary photography, and all for a reasonable price. And they are delivered directly to your doorstep each month. They offer free shipping to the US, Canada, and the UK. It's subsidized elsewhere. It's a great way to begin or expand your photo library. Join the club at charcoalbookclub.com today, and remember to use the promo code TheCandidFrame at checkout. People choose the clothes they wear for a variety of reasons. Some dress for comfort or to identify with a particular culture or community. Some wear a uniform that reflects their job or career. And whether we're conscious of it or not, what we wear and how we wear it affects how others see us and even interact with us. However, some people dress as if they themselves were a piece of art. Name brands and fashion trends don't influence their choices. Instead, they use fabrics, textures, and shapes like a painter works with paint on a canvas. These are the people that Robbie Quinn has photographed and compiled in his book, Street Unicorns. They are bold in their choices and create something of themselves that you can't take your eyes off. This is Ibarian X, and welcome back to The Candid Frame.
All right, so fire away.
Yeah, but these glasses that I'm wearing that people can't see, I've always been very conservative, and my relationships with clothes have always been about conforming or hiding parts of my body that I wasn't comfortable with. And I think that probably speaks for a lot of people. So looking through the book and looking at these photographs really reminds me of the power of clothes, not so much style, but how the choice of clothes can be very self-affirming and powerful. And that's what fascinates me about the work that you've been doing.
Thank you. Thank you.
Because I don't see this book as a style book, clothing style. I think it's like far from it. But first, define for me what a street unicorn is, or a unicorn.
Right.
And
right.
What is it? What is it that? How do you personally identify that?
Well, the term came to me late in the mix, like a lot of photographers that are working on a project. The project finds them, and I won't get into that story. I'll directly answer your question. I'll tell you that for me, a street unicorn is anybody that draws outside the lines of conformity. And it may be subtle, like a pocket square, some colorful socks, but it also might be more adventurous than that. In a sense, I think we're all street unicorns. Somebody that might, like what you're saying, you dress conservative, but there is either a conscious or a subconscious intentionality about that. For you're you say you're looking to hide some parts of your body, or some people dress really out there so that they don't have to talk to somebody. Other people dress really out there so they are talking to people. So, but there's a vibe, and in the core of it, like anything, when you pull away the extremities, the style really starts from within. And, photographers, they're looking to get to that essence of somebody. And the style, it's a way of communication in the same way that if you're speaking a foreign language or and you're looking to get across a message to somebody, that message might be I really don't want to talk to you, or I want to fit in, or I don't want to fit in. So for me, a street unicorn is somebody that does, in the broad sense of it, is somebody that is going against conformity, not because they want to, but because they can't not do it. Because to not do it, they wouldn't be them. They wouldn't be their most authentic self. And it's a realization of what's going on inside. And it's one of those things where it is a little difficult to pinpoint it, but when you see it, you know it, if that makes sense.
Oh, yeah. No, absolutely. I was in Johannesburg and I saw this man wearing a combination of things that my first mind says that shouldn't work at all. But he made it work. And I stopped him. I mean, we talked for about like 20 minutes. And it was really a fascinating conversation, to hear about him, his sensibilities, where he had found the clothes.
That might have been what I would call. I came upon this, and I either grabbed onto the term. I don't think I made this up, but I often use this term "power clash," and it's where somebody is wearing. They might be wearing checks and stripes at the same time. And a friend of mine who's originally from Nigeria, an excellent photographer, Josiah Iswa, he does this great. And, you look at it and it should not work, but somehow it does. And that's, it's fascinating to see how people construct things. Yeah,
because I think that most people wear clothing as a uniform.
Absolutely.
A sort of a declaration of not necessarily who they are, but what they aspire to be. For example, my wife and I went to breakfast a couple of months ago. And a very popular breakfast place. And this woman, and her 2 children were there. And her and all the children were just covered in name brand, like Gucci, Armani.
Right,
and I looked at that, and it struck me that, the kids' clothing, how much of that is a reflection of themselves, and how much of it is a reflection of what the parent wants to express.
That's right.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And especially in this town in Los Angeles, there's so much. I see so much of that.
You speak to something that I think is a thread that goes through what I would consider a street unicorn, is that they do march to another drum. And whereas some of them will wear name brand items, they are not owned by it. They are owning it. And a lot of them thrift. A lot of them will not wear something that does have a name brand on it. Or, but I think the deal is that they are owning it. They're not. A lot of times when somebody is looking to fit in, that they will default to what society is asking them to do. And that name brand might say, look, I belong with you, or you belong with me. And I'm not knocking that. I do think that for what you're speaking of is that that sounds like a sad case, because it's almost objectifying the children to use them as status symbols. Like, here's my Mercedes. Oh, and here's my kid wearing Gucci, and that would be horrible. You want the best things. You want the best things for your children, and that's understandable. And you do want them not to get criticized or hurt, I think. But and I'm certainly not a child psychologist or anything, but I feel like a better message to a child is to find their value from within. And I think that is something that is going on with a lot of the people that I photograph, is that they're reaching inside, and they may be on a journey. They may have arrived at a certain place for now. This may be it for where they are for the rest of their time on Earth, but they're really looking to speak to themselves, speak to others, and be authentic. Because I don't think there's anything wrong with wearing something that is people would consider would be conforming. If that's who you are, that's cool. That's cool. I'm not saying that. Like for me, I dress fairly conservative, and there was a time when I didn't. There was a time when the hair was halfway down my chest, and I had the earrings and an entire can of Aquanet hairspray in my hair because I was in a band. Had long trench coats, handcuffs on my on my belt loops, and all kinds of stuff. But I feel very comfortable with who I am now, and there are. It's a constant growth period. We all should be growing in every facet of our life. And I can tell you that my experience with all the people that I've photographed for this project, they have taught me to be a lot more intentional about how I present myself, not just the clothes, but everything, hair, your glasses, anything. They speak to who you are, and you're speaking to yourself. A lot of people, you want to. Everybody does this in the morning, to some degree. Everybody thinks, okay, I'm going to wear that shirt on Monday, this shirt on Tuesday, and they have it in their mind, and they're just doing a 9 to 5. But it might be, I'm going to wear my striped tie today, or I'm going to wear my red dress on Friday. They're thinking about it, and but the real connection is this who they really are? Have they really thought about it? And style can extend to every part of your life, whether it's, it might be a camera. It might, I want to, this, I want to have this Leica because, that's, it is a style, but I mean, hopefully it's utilitarian first. But there's some people that they want to walk around with that red dot.
Yeah.
But I think it goes to your car, to your house, the furniture you put in your home, everything. You're expressing yourself, and again, I think it is a language unto itself. Like music is a language unto itself, and I feel like that everything we're doing is communicating, and so I don't know if that answers your question there.
No, that's good. That's good because one of the things that strikes me about all the people in your book is that they can dress this way not so much because they have a superior sense of style. It's because at some point they've come to trust themselves and
Absolutely.
who they are. And then the clothes are the outcome of that. Because you can see somebody dressing, kind of eclectically, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they own it. Because there's a lot of mimicry that happens in fashion and style. But, the street unicorn is a creature unto itself, hence the name.
Right. For me, I think something that attracts me to the whole project is that when I was younger and I was in a band, is that I wanted so badly to be a rock star, and at a certain point, all the record companies were very interested in our group, and then in the height of it, before it ever happened, it broke up. But there were people that were in the group that, and I'm not knocking them, that we were all great friends, but some of them would put on stage clothes, and then they would get off stage and they would go back into, their quote unquote regular clothes. And so when they were up on stage, it was almost like Halloween. They were in a costume. What I was wearing, which was the same, I wore it to weddings and funerals, and, this was who I was. This was who I felt I was. And then, because of that, I would get criticized. The family certainly didn't want me going to family events, where, if I took a can of spray paint that week and put it in my hair, they didn't like the fluorescent green or, fluorescent orange, whatever I found on the road for a work site. But
you probably got three baseball hats for Christmas every year.
My mother told me she was going to cut off my hair in the sleep and everything. But it was like, so I on a much lower level than a lot of the people that I photograph, I got a little flack for it, and I knew that it was like, well, this was me, and I'll move out, which I pretty much did at a fairly early age. I would couch surf and so forth because I just didn't want to hear it. I love my parents very much. They were amazing parents, but as I had to be me, and I think that in a sense, I think that photographers as a whole should understand this, because photographers march to a different drum. They're not. This is not a conventional job. This is like, I would tell, I never expected to be a photographer. My first wife wanted to be a photographer, and I was doing another business at the time, and she was looking to learn, and she didn't understand the basic principles of it. She had a big book. I don't remember the book, but I said, I'll read it for you and see what I can learn for you and try to translate it. And, you just basics, aperture speed and film speed, and shutter speed. And then I said, good luck with that. That's a really, I hope you do well, but that's a really stupid job. It's photography. If you're not working, you're not making money. There's rarely is there mailbox money. If you reach some certain level, it does. And everybody wants to do that, but basically you're cutting lawns. If you cut the lawn, you make the money. If you're not cutting lawn, you're not making money. And so it's a terrible business model, and I forgot about it for a while. But then I was managing. I went from performing. I became a concert promoter, and then I went on to manage acts. And when I was managing, I was hiring photographers for the acts, and they were pretty good. But I wanted to save myself some money one day, and I picked up a Minolta 700X, a little 35 millimeter film camera, and I remembered everything that I communicated previously to my first wife, and I took the photos. MySpace was big at the time. I put them up there, and people started calling, and they wanted to know who the photographer was. And what my rates were. And I was like, okay, well, this is fun. It was the first thing creative that I was able to express myself with since performing music myself. Everything else was business. And, it's, but all of this is very unconventional. And so, most photographers have had somebody in their family at some point say, get a real job. And, and you can't, you have to do it. If you're really serious about it, if somebody does a workshop with me, I'll ask them, I'll say, have you ever considered doing something else? And, cause this isn't really a big money pit. It's not real estate. It's not being a stockbroker or a doctor, or lawyer kind of thing. And I'm like, do it if you cannot not do it. And right. I mean, that's the way it is for me. And it's so I think that is how, if you can grasp that as a photographer and say, I cannot not do this, that's how these people dress. They cannot not do it. Because if they were not, I mean, if somebody took your camera away from you, you would feel like a part of you was gone. And
absolutely.
Yeah. So this is the same thing. Somebody that's, dressing a certain way, if you took that away from them, they would feel like they just had their camera ripped out of their hands.
So how does that understanding of yourself play a role in the pictures that you make?
Well, actually, going back to performing, when I was a musician, we had our photo taken a lot. And I was interested in photography at that point too. All through my life, when I was a little kid, I had a little 110 camera, and then my father had bought my mother the very first SX70 land camera, the Alpha with the leather case, and I have that in my possession now. And so I'd always been taking photos. And when we had our photo taken, somebody'd come with a big box. I don't even know what it was. It was probably a Hasselblad or something. But I'd want to know, what are you doing? How are you doing that? And we were. It's funny, but we were a poser hair band, and poser is operative word. It's all these like mugs. But you were. My experience with that is that, the whole idea of quote unquote like rock star, when I picked up the camera, I first started photographing musicians, and I photographed everybody. Like, okay, this is going to be the cover of Rolling Stone. This is going to be the cover of like Vibe magazine or something like that. And then I started photographing models, and I was like, all right, this is going to be the cover of, Vogue or whatever. But actually, I still photograph them like musicians. And, I think about people, photographers through, throughout history, like an Annie Leibovitz or Danny Clinch, Mick Rock, Henry Diltz, Jim Marshall, Bob Gruen, all of these people, they were all, everything popped. Everything was like very present, and everything was very forward, like like a publicity photo that somebody has. They're looking right into the camera. They're connecting with the camera. And so when I started photographing people, this is my approach. And I still do that. It's just, I want to get to the essence of the person, and I want them to not just communicate with what they're wearing, but I want to have them, like I said earlier, it's like the clothes, what they're wearing, their style. It's an extension of who they are inside, and that's what I'm really photographing. is what's inside, and the clothes and the style. It's basically just parsley on the plate for the meal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. You're photographing these people largely on the street. There's no gray or white background behind them at all. You're photographing relatively to where you found them. But what role does the setting play in the effectiveness of the photograph for you?
Well, you had mentioned, I know that I had peeked in and you were doing an interview with Frederick Van Johnson on This Week in Photo and talking about your own book, and about light and shadows, lines and shapes, colors and gestures, and so forth. And I think that those are defining points for you that are really common to every photographer that finds a photo that is that locks in. I might say lines and circles, but it's the same. Your mind is still there, and so the setting's not always perfect. Somebody, for people listening, when I photograph somebody, oftentimes it's a chance meeting, more times than not, and I see somebody and I am going to photograph them right where I find them. Fortunately, New York does have amazing light, and you were speaking to two women that had been participants in a book. Melissa Beyer and Emily Sanjay, and I'm actually friends with Melissa's partner, and Eric Kogan, and I heard her talking about New York having great light. It does, and I think I have it figured out, because like every city that I've photographed in, and not all the photos that are in my book are from New York. I have people in there from Mumbai and Sydney and Paris, London, Toronto, all over Seattle, but it is predominantly in New York. And the island of Manhattan, the streets run north and south, but the island is actually on an axis, and it's so you get a lot of this indirect light going through these straight streets. And I mean, there's a lot of curved streets down at the bottom of Manhattan, but that's what makes the light bounce off the buildings. And so you almost get, if there's always good light in New York, and I predominantly photograph in the shade, and I like it if I find somebody that I can just bring them to the nearest corner and use the darkness. When you're talking about like lights and shadows, there's always a shady side of the street, normally. And if you bring them in the shade, but then you're walking to the front into that corner and you pull them almost to the edge of the corner, then that bouncing light is going to create enough contrast that the subject is popping, but the background is still, in that shade. And, contrary to what, you would think sometimes if the background is blown out, that could be really cool too. There's no rules, but you're just looking for things to pop. And sometimes it happens, sometimes it doesn't. But, and then in terms of shapes and lines, sure, you don't want a telephone pole coming out of the top of their head. and the colors, it's great if you can find if you can find, I mean, most of the people that I want to photograph are wearing colorful clothes, and it's usually not too hard to find a gray or dull city building to have them against, or in the background. And in terms of lines and shapes, any city, especially if the streets are close, if you're in Paris, or if you're in some Barcelona or somewhere like that, any street, you put somebody in the middle of the street, it's an easy photo. But if they're in the middle of the street, you're going to have leading lines going right to them and saying, hey, look at this, look at the person in the middle. And and then that's only a starting ground to move them around. So the city is an amazing backdrop. I love looking for light. It's all about the light. I'll have people, if I'm not sure how things are going, I'll spin them around, and I'll try to look at how the light is hitting them from this direction, that direction, this direction. I'm like, okay, now we got it. We're gonna photograph here.
Yeah. Yeah, that comment, I hear that comment all the time, that New York has a special quality of light. And it's not like the sun is acting differently in this particular part of the world. It's, as you said, the light is being shaped and reformed because of the reflective surfaces of the office buildings, or because of the street is so
narrow. But I see that. I see that in every city, though, and you just have to ride the wave. Like if you're in London, it has its own light. And in December, I was in LA, and I did something that I normally totally don't do, but I shot in direct sunlight. I just it was very, her name escapes me. Unworthen. This is terrible. She's an amazing photographer. But it's that whole blowout in the face, and just let the sun, sometimes, obviously if you photograph somebody in the shade, it can be very flattering, but sometimes you want to go for that real grit, it's where you get every detail, you get every line and pore and that kind of thing. So wherever you are, you just use that light and go with it.
The Charcoal Book Club is back as a sponsor and wants to share a special event coming this year. The Chico Review is an annual event that gathers photographers to celebrate their love for photography. It's more than just a chance to share your work and meet publishers and editors. It's a rare chance to be surrounded and immersed by a community that prioritizes photography and being a photographer over the latest camera reviews. If you've never had such an experience, mark the date and register for the event scheduled for March 17th through the 24th in Prairie, Montana. Find out more by visiting chicoreview.com or charcoalbookclub.com. The pandemic over the last two and a half years now.
Sure.
How did that sort of change your approach and the way that you would photograph the people?
The pandemic definitely was a game changer, and it turned out to be really, from a photography standpoint, it was a growing period for me. Prior to the pandemic, most of the photos that I was photographing were with a 35 millimeter lens. I would always I've abandoned zooms probably almost 10 years ago. I like to put a prime on and just, move. And it just works for me. I won't go into that too much, but the 35, it really worked because you're on a busy street. You want to take a photo of somebody, full body, 3/4 headshot, and 35 is not great for a headshot, but it's magic to be on a busy street and still get a full body photo of somebody without another person in the city walking between you and the camera. And you can get close enough that, you can get that photo off and not have to wait. Okay, here comes somebody. Okay, wait, that kind of thing. And I like it is definitely more of a street focal length, and there's a lot of other things that I photograph besides people, and that I just don't really post because I want to have a consistent narrative. And when the pandemic hit, obviously I didn't want to be close to people. And I was thinking, okay, what's going to happen? Because I am a full-time commercial photographer. I do a lot of headshots for LinkedIn, for doctors, lawyers, stockbrokers, and real estate people, and politicians, and everything like that. And I was like, oh no, I don't know what business is going to be like. How am I going to pay rent and so forth? And about a month and a half into it of doing nothing but holing up in my apartment and having things delivered, I got a call, and somebody's running for office, and they wanted, me to be their campaign photographer. And I was like, wow. I don't know about this, and I said, all right, well, if we're going to do it, these are the rules. And, at the time there was no KN95 masks, and I was double masked. Fortunately for me, all of my commercial work, I approach it the same way I do the street. It's all quote unquote environmental portraits. And this is how I started the whole process. I'm an environmental portrait photographer. I moved to New York, and it's my day off, and I'm like, well, what am I going to do? I could sit at home, or I can like a football player, I can go to football practice. I can work out, and I'm going to go on the street and just work out. And it's pretty much the catalyst to the whole thing. So going back to the pandemic, people were attracted, when people are hiring me, they're hiring me for this environmental portrait, and anything like all those vocations that I'm mentioning, people want to make a connection with their customers. And, the studio portrait, it can, it's not as accessible sometimes to the marketplace. They want to see you in action. If you're a real estate agent, you want to see them on the scene and so forth. So anyway, I get a call from a politician, and I said, all right. And I'm like, how am I going to do this? Well, I'm going to switch to an 85 millimeter and at a 1.4 85 lens. And I was able to be far enough away now with double masks to still take, with the high resolution some of the digital cameras have, I was able to get in to do a quote unquote headshot. I mean, it's not the same as really that when you do it with an 85 and then you're a foot away from somebody, and their ears are blurred and the eyes are locked in, I wasn't doing something like that, but I was getting in pretty close. And so, I got that. And then all of a sudden people are calling, and 2020 was actually more financially rewarding than 2019, because there was such a demand for a photographer. And all the photographers I knew were trying to figure things out. How am I going to pay my bills? How am I going to do this? I knew there were many people doing this. I personally knew one guy. I couldn't fathom doing it. He was good at it. People all around the world, they were giving him permission to access their cell phone, and he would have them set up their cell phone, and then he'd direct them around their room. They could be anywhere in the world.
Oh yeah, read about that. Yeah,
and then he's on his computer and he hits the button, and then he has it. The photo comes to him, and then he puts it into Photoshop. And some of the cell phones have good resolution, and he was able to do what he did, and he paid some bills, and that was great. But people still wanted photos. They still wanted to be relevant. They're trying to stay afloat. And so I was out there taking photos, and it did really well as long as I was able to stay away. Now, that was commercially. For the book, I still wanted to go out. And I found that at a certain point, and I think, everything was really locked down in March 2020, and it was really scary here in New York. There was a point when like 500 people a day were dying. I'd see a refrigerator truck. I'm right around the corner from a hospital, and I'd see them loading bodies in a refrigerator truck like they're, it was sad, very sad. And there was no vaccine. So you're like, I walking on eggshells. And, but at that point, I didn't want to take public transportation. I'm a big advocate of public transportation. I'll take the bus, subway, and, there's some people that are like, I only take the taxi or I'll get a private car. And I'm like, I don't live in that world. And I want to be with people. I want to be on a subway where they're speaking 15 different languages. I want to go to my barber and I'd leave and I say Lahit Tarot, and I go to the bodega, I say Masalama. I want to, I think in general, people are either they're driven by fear or curiosity. And fear is good because you don't want to burn your hand on the stove. But I think curiosity just opens up a whole world of learning from each other and sharing ideas and just growing. And but the public transportation was out. So I had a bicycle that I've almost sold or given away 3 or 4 times. And I was like, wow, I'm glad I have my bicycle. And so I hopped on it like I was Bill Cunningham and grabbed the camera and strapped it around me with the 85 millimeter. And I went riding. I live up by Central Park, but I spend a lot of time down in Soho. And I photographed, a lot of the streets and everything. I know people have done amazing books of empty New York, and it is haunting. That wasn't my deal. I love to live in a world with rose-colored glasses, and I just wanted to see the beauty. And all of a sudden, I started seeing people emerge, almost like, cockroaches when the lights go off. They're like, okay, it's safe. I'm gonna come out a little bit now. And when they came out, they were hungry to express themselves. They were hungry for human contact. And so I'd be across the street. And, you just see somebody. I'm like, hey, you look great. And I started seeing a trend. People were not satisfied with just wearing a white or black or gray KN95. Or if they were dressing it up. People were putting bling on it. They were, wearing colorful bandanas around it. And, all of a sudden, the masks became a style accessory, and that was just like I would see the color, and I'd be like, "Wow, this is something." And so I started photographing people with their masks on. I do them with their mask on, and then really, I might do the mask where I got a little closer, and then I would step back, a few more feet and say, okay, if you're comfortable, take the mask off. And normally they would. And, and it was safe because there's nobody else on the street. It's just like you'd find a lone person on the street. And then as things started easing up, more people came out. I think it was a really special time. And then we moved on. And then during 2020, there's a couple of events that happen. It's around this time of the year. It's Pride, and there's during Pride, the LGBT community still wanted to express themselves, and that was special. But then there was also there was Black Lives Matter, and this was too important not to see what meaningful photos that I could take that could help tell a narrative or a story. And everything I'm doing, I'm taking photos of style, but it's really just the photo and the style are really just a platform to talk about bigger issues. If you're, when somebody reads the book, they'll get it, that it's really about diversity, equity, and inclusion. And that's a pretty, fashionable phrase right now. But, it's something that needs to be taken. It's overdue. This has got to be addressed. Like, it should have been addressed hundreds of years ago, but no time like now. So when this was happening, there was one event that I was particularly interested in going to. I have a friend that encouraged me to go to this one march, is peaceful protest, and it was up by Andrew Clayton on 125th, and everybody dressed in suits, and kind of a hark to Malcolm X, and this was the only event that I was at where the police were actually really they were only there to direct traffic. That was it. There were other protests down, and we've all heard horrific stories of how the behavior was, and that there were people from that really had nothing to do with the protests that were there just to try to create propaganda and do everything. But at this event, everybody wore suits, and they had some great style, and there's some people in the book from it, and they had there was a narrative, and the whole idea for me is to help amplify other people's voices, and for them to be seen, whether it's an immigrant, or it's about ageism, Black Lives Matter, Asian hate, LGBTQ. The book is really a platform for people to be seen. And when you think about, when I go back to the idea that the style is really an expression of what's going on inside, at first I was just, it was my day off, and I'm just like looking for interesting people to photograph. But the more I talked to people, and the more I could see, that there was something going on behind the style, the more I started to talk to people and interview them, and find that, that through photography, that you can have a narrative and do more than have a cool photo. You want to have meaningful work, something that can actually help somebody feel something. And for me, it's I feel like the style and the photos are kind of like the bait. And I the book is it's really not for, it is for people that are in the LGBTQ community. It's for people that are in the Black and Asian community, immigrants and elderly people and so forth. But it's really for the people that really need to hear it and really read it, because the style and the photos was like, okay, somebody that normally wouldn't want to, or if somebody's like a bigot or something, and they're racist, and then they see this photo and they're like, oh wow, that's really wild style. I like, what are they about? And if I can change or influence one person's opinion with a photo and with a book, that's beautiful. I just want people, it's like you want the Grinch's heart to grow a little bit bigger.
I want to thank all of you who have supported the show financially. Your contributions helped us to create the Candid Frame app years ago, and that ensures you that you get every episode of the show downloaded to your phone or tablet. Unlike other apps that will stop downloading episodes if you haven't listened recently to the last few, with our app, you get every one. We can do that because you helped me do it. Your contributions have kept the wheels greased and moving for the last 18 years that we've been doing this. Your small contributions have made a big difference. And if these conversations have helped you and your photography, and you have yet to contribute, you can change that today by becoming a Patreon supporter. You can contribute $5, $10, $20 or more a month by visiting patreon.com/thecandidframe. Again, it's patreon.com/thecandidframe. Thank you. From my experience, the challenge isn't so much anything to do with the camera and what the subject sort of looks like. That may have been the initial thing that piqued my curiosity. But what I'm hoping to get is more than just a picture of what someone looks like.
Right.
Right. And it's about capturing a genuine moment where that person sort of reveals themselves through their eyes or their body language. And for me, one of the things that I've had to unlearn is not to rush it.
Yeah.
If the person has given me permission, I have to honor that time that they're giving me by being completely focused on bringing that moment.
That's right.
So that the shot is more than just visual. So what skills have you learned and you use in order to elicit that very kind of moment?
That's a great question. All right. So when I first started doing this, I was doing it definitely much faster, and the photos reflect that a bit. It's like, in a sense, you're making a sale. You're walking around the street. You had mentioned about people that are fishermen and hunters in another interview, and I'm both. I think there's, it's one of those things where you feel the street and you're like, should I just hang out for a while? Cause this is, I can feel something's happening here, or I need to keep moving. And, when you see somebody, you you have to be authentic about the whole thing. I keep saying that word, but it's, you can't just go and schmooze somebody and say, I want to take your photo. They have to know that you saw something about them that attracted you, that you thought it was very interesting. And that's what you need to tell them. And so when I first started doing this, like any, quote unquote street photographer, which I don't know that I really fall into that class because I'm doing more of a street portrait, and it's not authentic where I'm grabbing an authentic moment. It's a portrait, but I'd approach somebody, and tell them, I really like what's going on here. May I photograph you? And they would be like, okay, sure. And you get so excited that, you got that permission, because you're going to get some no's, and that's okay. Don't, a lot of photographers, if I do a workshop, they're like, well, what if they say no? And it's like, hey, you're in the soup now. They're going to say no. It just, and then you respect that and you move on. And, but that in the beginning, you're excited, and your process is a lot more hurried. And then I recognized that, that I'm photographing people that are intentional about the way they look. And, or, even if you're just, you're photographing somebody that's conforming to style, and you approach anybody on the street, if you find something about them that you sincerely find intriguing and you express that to them, you're going to make that human connection. And then if they're in, they're in. And, but it is New York, and people are busy. They're running fast. And there are times when I'll see somebody and I'm like, I just let them go. Even if they look fantastic, I just know that I would be interrupting their day. And I think that only comes from experience, because a lot of people would be like, don't leave any rock unturned. But, you just want to put out good energy. So, but moving forward, I started doing something that some people would think would be sneaky, but but my intention of it isn't. I don't carry a regular camera bag. And there are times, like when I was riding the bicycle, the camera's on my strap, and I don't carry any bag at all. And I'm just out there. Right now, I use like a little tote. I put some silicone wrap at the bottom.
Silica gel.
They have these wraps. They're almost like scuba material, and you can wrap a lens in it with a Velcro. It's like a square.
Oh, yeah.
And I'll use those as like padding inside my tote bag, and just throw the camera in there. And if you're on the subway and it's late at night, it's like, I just got a tote. I don't have $10,000 worth of equipment in here. Don't look at me. And I'm an old man. So sometimes I just leave the camera in the bag, and I just go up and I'll talk to somebody. And if we talk for a little bit and there's a good vibe, I'll ask them, may I take your photo, or may I photograph you? I don't like to say that word. I don't like shoot. I don't like shoot. I don't like take. But anyway, so then at that moment, then I would use the camera for it. And sometimes they might think I'm just, going to pull out a cell phone, but then they see the camera and they're like, wow, this is the real deal kind of thing. It's like, okay. And as far as speed, my approach, I really feel like if you can slow the process down, then that's all the better. And to do that, about a year ago, this is going to be laughable to some people listening, but about a year ago, I bought a Mamiya RZ67 Pro 2. It takes 120 film, media camera. This camera was designed to do nothing more than to be on a tripod in a studio for fashion and or maybe some other things, but that's what mainly people used it for. I carry this thing around with me with a viewfinder. This thing's gotta be like, I don't know, 10 pounds. There's a whole community of street photographers in New York. We see each other, we wave, we talk to each other for a little bit, and we go on our ways and everything like that. And I love that community. But they chuckle. Like they're sitting there with like a little M6 and, it weighs ounces or whatever. And, or like, I think you use a few different cameras. There was a point in time when I had the Fuji X series and enjoyed it very much. It's like the vibiest camera out there. That's digital and you just put it in your pocket. But this thing is a monster. But you're using film, and all of a sudden, every photo costs money. The process of loading the film on the street, you get 10 photos in a row and you want to make every photo count. And there are times when I'll find somebody that I consider a street unicorn. I'll ask them, may I photograph you? And they're like, sure. I might take one photo. And I've learned from some other photographers out on the street that photograph with film, it's like, one photo. If you don't get it in one photo, no good. Move on. They're very purists. And there have been times when I'll go through a roll with one person. There are times when I'll take, just use one photo. But that process has really slowed me down. I don't have the camera out on my hip when I meet people. I'm just, I'll have it in my bag and I'll ask them, after we talk a little bit, may I photograph you? Sure. They see this tank coming out and, and it has this great, when you advance the film, it goes, it's like this big, it's serious. But I like it. The reason I like this particular camera is I like the bellows. There's a lot of great medium format 120 cameras out there, like, the Pentax 6.7 or the Mamiya 7. But I like the bellows because you can get in for that close up if you want to. And, that's appealing to me. And, I'm hand holding it. There's no tripod. And so, your process is going to be slowed down. And, I think that I would have really had a difficult time with that in the beginning, but, after, years of doing it, your process in talking to people is you have it formulated, and you when you have an engaging conversation going on, that the people will take the time. And I think when I pull that camera out, when I pull the camera out, they're like, okay, all right, I have to pay attention now. So.
Yeah. When I approach someone, for me personally, I had to come to understand that it's the engagement. It's the connection that has to be more important than the photograph.
Absolutely.
Because if I approach this person and I'm thinking about what the photograph is going to look like, I am not in the space to capture that sort of genuine moment.
That's right.
And then I have to remember that. And because if I'm doing that, I'm introducing a lot of negative energy, including worrying that I'm going to overextend my time with this person. So I've really had to train myself do that. And when they say no, one of the best things that I've learned to do is I go, okay, no problem. Thank you. But I talk to them. I continue to talk to them.
Right. And then
Right?
they often will be like, you know what?
Sometimes, not every time.
Yeah. They'll go with it. Sure.
Let's do it.
Right.
Because they want to, for me, I think they want to feel like, you know, that you are seeing me and you have a sincere interest in me. Because people who dress like this, oftentimes, especially in a city like New York with an abundance of photographers, probably get approached a good amount of the time.
They get approached, and you'd be surprised.
So you have to be kind of.
Yeah, you'd be surprised. Even in New York, there's still hate, and there's still, New York is, out of all the places that I've been, it has not only the diversity, but it does have a lot of inclusion. But there is still, it's not perfect, and a lot of the people that I photograph still are subjected to hate. And and it could be even older people that are just they experience neglect, and they don't get the respect. We have a society that when somebody gets to be a certain age, they're kind of disposable, and so people want to be seen. And yeah, it is about trust. I think I learned a lot about this previously when I was in music. Not only did I perform, and you're learning a lot about collaboration, but I was producing, and producing is about having somebody give a really authentic performance, and that a person has to know that they're valued, and when somebody feels that, then they're going to the guard will come down.
And even if a picture doesn't happen, you had that connection with another human being.
That's right.
Which I find just as satisfying as anything else.
Absolutely. It's I love talking to people. I love listening to them and hearing their stories. I've in one, I'm gonna say that, after, I'm not ancient, but I've had enough years under my belt that I'm understanding that things that we do in life that sometimes you don't feel like they have any meaning, later in life they do. It all comes together. And having a conversation with somebody, you might have that conversation like what you're talking about, and they're not into it, and you might walk away, and that's that. But even in New York, I always call New York a big small town. You'll see somebody again and again, and 2 years from now, you might say hello to somebody, and then maybe that connection deepens then. But I think that there are things that I've done earlier in life, whereas like I had this opinion that I couldn't fathom 30 years ago that I would be a photographer. And I was a lot more concerned about getting ahead and so forth. But I recognize that there were things that I've been doing since I was a child that are now contributing to my skills as a photographer. You talk about light and shadows. For me, previously being a musician, I look, when I'm on the street, I see sound, because light and shadows to me are bass and treble. So you look at your radio and you have a bass and a treble, and you have a mid range, you have the mids. In the recording studio, that expands to what's called a third octave EQ. So imagine you have on your radio dial bass and treble, but you actually have 31 different controls. And so like on your setup, on your sound for your podcast, they may give you a small option to say, I need a little more 5K in my resonance, and you control little sliders. Imagine having 31 of those. And so for me, when I see light and shadow, and I see these gradients, I'm actually it's like I can almost equate a light and say, that's 2K, and okay, I need a little more of that. And for a photographer listening, it's almost like your histogram that you have on your editing platform. But if you could take that histogram and not see it on your camera, not see it on your editing, but you're just out there on the street, and that's what you see. For me, all of these different categories that you have, like light and shadows, lines and shapes, colors and gestures, I see them individually and then collectively. And so like I can look at a scene and I don't see the lines and shapes, and I don't see the colors and gestures for a moment. It's almost like the Matrix. All I see are light and shadows. And then I'll blink, and all I see are lines and shapes. And then I put it all together. And I don't know how to explain how to do that. I think if if you go out one day and the only thing you do is concentrate on lines and shadows as a practice, and all you do one day is concentrate on the colors and gestures, and you don't worry about the other stuff. If you just learn that, it's almost the same as like if you're a piano player, which is what I did. If all you did was learn the left hand part one day and you didn't play the right hand part, just concentrate on the left, and that's your light and shadows. And the next day, all you do is concentrate on the lines and shapes or colors and gestures, and you don't worry about the lights and shadows anymore. And it's like a performance. And then you can do this to a point where your left hand is playing, but it's automatic and you don't even know what's happening. It's on autopilot, but you have to concentrate on it so much. And so now when I'm out there again, I'll look, and it's like everything else gets like blocked out of my mind, and all I see are the lines and shapes or circles, and then blink and boom, it's all together. But and if it doesn't come automatic to you, it's something that I feel like as a skill, if you just concentrate one at a time, again and again and again, and then when it's the right time, put it together, it happens.
Yeah, that's exactly it. It's so well put. Because it's like you learn all these graphic visual mechanics, and once they become so instinctual, all that you are concerned with from that moment on is the moment.
Sure.
Because everything else has sort of been figured out.
Another parallel is that like when and it's been so long ago, but I mean, like when you learned the camera and again, in an earlier conversation when, I think you were talking just in the last episode with Gregory Heisler about him teaching, and it's like some people are using a cell phone, they don't understand aperture, they don't understand speed. But like when you were learning the basics of a camera, whether it's your film speed or your ISO, you needed to learn each of those individually and really embrace it before you could put the three of them together. And it's pretty easy to put two of them. It's pretty easy to put two of them together. And oftentimes I might photograph with aperture priority so that I don't have to think about things too much. But you do have to know, and because when the three of those things come together, the speed and the aperture and the ISO or the shutter speed and the film speed or ISO and the aperture, then it becomes a recipe, and I think it's in a similar situation when you're putting the 3 parameters that you were talking about with, and even 4, because gestures and colors are definitely 2 different things. And
Right.
yeah, and I'm thinking about all these things, and there is an aspect of what I do that is, you were talking about the speed. I like to slow it down, but when I'm doing my commercial work, there is a lot more time. People are paying for this time. And when I'm on the street, there is still an aspect of it that is quote unquote fast food photography, and I don't want to cheapen. I don't want to cheapen it, but you have to, if you have a client and you're going to do a portrait session, that session might last a half a day or a full day. And, you're going to, you're going to condense that into, sometimes a minute or 3 minutes. And so depending upon how things are going, it's, it's like trying to make a symphony into a 3-minute song. And it still has to have an introduction, and it has to have a theme that's built upon the chorus, the recapitulation, and everything like that. But you have to do it in 3 minutes. You have to have that hook, and so I think I draw from that so much. It's like when you're going to photograph somebody, and it's you gotta put it all in really quick. But I think
that's great.
I think something that's important to I've already touched on it, but to mention to listeners, and I don't think it's for everybody, but I do feel like in today's world, there's so many social issues that are in front of us. Some of the ones that I've worked on, and of course, there's things that are going on politically and with climate and all kinds of various things. And I think it's a great time to do meaningful work with the camera, and that beyond doing all these technical aspects of photography, that it is a language, like the clothes and the style are for these street unicorns, and that they're communicating something in a way that is their language. That as photographers, we have our own language. It's a picture tells 1,000 words, or whatever the phrase is. It's like when you see a photo, and if there's a person in it, it's like, okay, who is in the photo, and what is their situation, and what is happening? What's the event that's happening, and what is the emotion that's happening? And out of all of it, what's the result? And this is the meaningfulness. And if we have this power of communication, if we're able to take a compelling photo, why are we taking the photo? Why are we doing this? What is our language? What is it that we are looking to say to somebody, and what do we want them to feel? And then after they feel it, what is the result? Are we going to compel somebody to do something more? For me, I want people to be more inspired, to take more risks with their own personal style, and to be their most authentic selves. And more importantly, I want them to appreciate and accept, and I think appreciate's even more important. You can accept somebody, but I want them to appreciate people that are different than themselves. I think of this story that I've totally made up. It's fabricated, but it gets a good point across, is that when I always think about this imaginary story of people coming to New York, and one of them is French, one person's French and one person's Irish, and the Irish guy has a bunch of potatoes, and the French guy sees it and says, "Oh, French fries! we can do something with that potato." but that only happens, things like that, because that's a fake story. But it's only to illustrate that when we are able to accept and appreciate somebody that's different than ourselves, then we can share ideas and feelings and thoughts, and we can grow, and we can progress and become better. And I feel like we're missing out on a lot of opportunities if we don't do that. And I feel like as photographers that there's such a vast, and this is a good thing and it's a bad thing, but there's such a vast opportunity for us to do meaningful work, and through that there has to be a why. Why are you taking this photo? Now, I'm all for the spontaneity. There's definitely times I snap without thinking. I just like, you're compelled, you're like, ooh, shiny squirrel, and you just photograph something, and I think that that's a gift, because sometimes some great photos come from that. That it's that whole Henri Cartier-Bresson, the decisive moment. You want to, you don't get that if you don't go with your gut and just go for it sometimes. But I think that there's also another aspect of it where it's okay to have an agenda. It's okay to be like, I want to say something with my work. And because if you're not saying anything, if you're not compelling somebody to feel something, to think about something, then it's meaningless, and I don't want to say that taking a beautiful photo of a flower is meaningless, because it's not, but I think there has to be intention behind it.
Yeah. And I think that sensibility, that comes with time, especially if you make photographs often enough where the technical part of it is just an automatic sort of reflex, right? So the camera itself is not getting in the way. But then what we're talking about right now is, what would be the right word? There has to be a certain confidence in your process, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you have to completely understand it.
Right.
But you have to trust it.
Well, for instance,
and that for me has always been the journey.
Well, for instance, language is becoming more and more important to me, and I can do okay in Spanish. I'm learning Portuguese, and there becomes a point. There comes a point when you're going to speak with somebody in another language where you don't think about it. It is, it just comes naturally. It is your words. There's this point when you say, I'm going to think of a word that everybody would know, like hola. Nobody has to think about hola. They know it means hello.
Yeah.
And when you gain more and more of a vocabulary in whatever language it is, if I'm seeing somebody and they're Chinese, I say ni hao, and it's like, if you don't have to think, and it is really just natural. It's your second instinct to just come up with this phrase or this word or to have a whole conversation in another language. Photography is a language, and on one level, everybody can speak it, but in every language, you want to be an effective communicator, and you want to be as effective as you can, and you want to be able to have as much communication with as many people as you can. And to do that, you really want to study the language. And then when you do, then that those feelings and thoughts that you have, you just have a better way to express them. It's not like I want to be, I'm a badass photographer. I'm more, everybody wants to be a badass photographer, but it's more, it's more that you want to be like, I can effectively talk to people more. I can speak their language. When you can present a photo to a lot of people and they all understand what your intention of it was, that's great. I mean, there's a lot of people that create art. There's a lot of people that create art and they're like, I want everybody to just see what it means to them. I don't have any message. And that's cool. If it just makes makes some people angry, makes some people happy, that has its place. But for me, I want to deliver a message, and the photo is as much of a language as Italian or Swahili or whatever.
Yeah. Well, my last question that I ask each guest is I ask them to recommend a photographer for our listeners to discover and explore, and it can be anyone.
I know.
So who would that photographer be for you and why?
I have a list of 10 really well-known names that everybody knows, and they range from fashion to music. There are a lot of portraits, and I even though it's completely different from what I do like Fan Ho, but I have a name for you of somebody that's not those household names, and it's a photographer that is in New York, and his name is Jean-Andre Antoine. And Jean-Andre, he's still a relatively young guy, and he's a street photographer. He uses a speed graphic camera, the peel apart 4x5s.
Yeah.
He's a protege of another pretty well-known photographer, Luis Mendez, but he's taken this technology and he approaches it with this very hip vibe, and he is able to marry commercial and art together. He's on the street. He's usually on Prince Street between Crosby and Broadway, and he's the fisherman. He just stays there. He posts his 4x5s. He tacks them up on the wall. People come by. The film cost for this camera is relatively expensive, and probably $8 to $10 a photo. And he's open for business. Tourists come by, but also people that are in the neighborhood that are pretty well known. Spike Lee has come by, and they pay him for the photo. He's just set up like a buck. What do they call him? A buckster? Not a buckster. I don't know. I can't remember the word.
A busker, yeah, busker, like a musician.
Busker. But not kind of like that. He's just there, and there's like an art community. There's no permit or anything like that. It's. But he's been written up in a lot of places and everything. But he's doing something really cool, because there is, I've noticed with me photographing with the Mamiya, there's a quality about the film cameras that there is an imperfection that makes things really cool. And I've heard it on your show, and I've heard it other places. I always tell people, there's like a prog rock band that plays every note really precisely, and there's a group of kids that like that. But there's the sloppy guitar of Keith Richards, and that's me. I'd rather have you feel it than appreciate that I hit every note just right. And the film cameras, there's an essence about them that is that sometimes it's a little soft, sometimes the color is not quite right. But I love it when somebody reaches out to me and sends me a message, and they see a photo that I did with 120 film, and they're like, "That photo looks really cool. What filter did you use?" And, and it's like, no. And I like the film cameras, because you change the film, you change the look of the camera. And, but Jean-André's doing this deal with this peel apart. You can't replicate this with some, Photoshop kind of thing. And it's just so natural. And then to take it and do something really vibey with it. He's attracted the attention of some major brands. I know Nike was one of them. And I think he's going to be a really big thing. He's already big, but I think he's going to be huge at one point. And you can find him at JeanAndréAntoine.com. And I'm inspired by what he does.
Well, Robbie, thank you so much for your time. A beautiful book, and a really wonderful conversation. It was a great way for me to start.
Thank you. It was an honor.
Thanks to Robbie for joining us. Learn more about Robbie and his work by visiting RobbieQuinnPhotography.com. And if you're a fan of our work, you can write reviews on whatever service you use to listen to podcasts, and share a favorite episode on social networks, be it X, formerly Twitter, Facebook, or Instagram. Remember to use the hashtag #TheCandidFrame. You can also support us financially by contributing via PayPal or Patreon. Thanks to Marie Astrid Gonzalez for her recent contribution. We've also relaunched our newsletter, and if you want to receive updates on everything related to TCF, including book recommendations and workshops, please visit our website and sign up. And if you can't find every show episode on whatever service you use to listen to podcasts, download the Candid Frame app, available for both Apple iOS and Android. And because of your generosity, it's free to download and use. No additional purchases are required. The Candid Frame's audio engineer is Martin Taylor, who you can find at theothermartintaylor.com. The show's senior producer is Cynthia Parker. And this is Ibarian X, and this is The Candid Frame.